intermittent issues are something we deal with all the time in our shops. And I bet you're thinking right now of an intermittent problem that you have with your car that happens so infrequently that you know you're going to go to the shop, and it's like going to the doctor. When you go to the doctor, you don't feel sick. You're going to take it in the shop, you're going to get in the car, you're going to drive with a guy, and nothing's going to happen, and you're going to be embarrassed because of this intermittent issue. But there is ways to handle intermittent issues, and there's ways that they're hard to handle.
Well,
So
there's all kinds. I mean, we have diagnostic issues of my car stalls, and just once in a while it just shuts off, or the brakes squeak like. Well, it didn't do it yesterday or today, but the other day it did it kind of when I was doing something. So it's
some sort of circumstance or, well, I always think of electrical issues because that's the most intermittent issue that we deal with at our shop, and someone has an issue, and the one I can think of is we had one come in with basically the code, diagnostic trouble code was for a bad shift solenoid. Well, the first thing we do is
now hold on a minute, Dave. I'm gonna beat you up a little bit. The code doesn't say there's a bad shift solenoid. It's probably a code for a performance issue of the circuit or something like that.
No, it was actually it was an electrical circuit fault in relation to this solenoid. Okay. So the word solenoid was in there.
Okay, so not.
So the customer went to AutoZone and he said, "Hey, they told me I got a bad solenoid, so I want a new solenoid." Yeah. So I said, "Well, we'll test it out. We'll diagnose it. We see what we find, and you may very well need a solenoid, but let's check it out." So we go drive it, and the transmission works perfect. And we see the code. We clear the code. The code does not come back. We test that solenoid. Guess what? It tests perfectly. Well, he still wants a solenoid. So guess what?
Careful what you wish for, though.
We sold him one. Just a trial and error thing because it was so intermittent. It was only happening once a week, once every 2 weeks. We sold him a solenoid, and guess what? 3 days later, came back, same solenoid code. So that's an intermittent issue. Any technician can, he can have all the skills in the world, but if it's not acting up at the time that he's looking at the car, all the tests that he's going to run are going to test normal.
Yeah, I mean, we can, like in the instance of a solenoid, we can run a test on that, and the bench test isn't exercising it like the car does. It's not hot. It's not, we put them and we bake them sometimes. We'll put them on a hot plate. We'll do things with them. But you've got to simulate these conditions, and just the perfect world of a bench test isn't always the same as being in the car and being under actual operating and loaded conditions. So they can be difficult.
Well, so you have one of these intermittent issues going on with your car, and I guess the question is, when do you live with it? And when do you go track it down? And is it one of those issues where you're going 55 on the freeway or 75 on the freeway and your car just quits? Well, that's an issue we probably got to deal with. Can't really let that one go.
Well, so the question is, when do you deal with it? Is if you've lost some faith or confidence in the vehicle. If you're not comfortable driving it, it's time to part with the car for a day or two or a week or whatever it may be, so that the shop that you're working with can test drive this car, maybe use it to go run an errand, maybe have a technician drive it home at night, and so that we can duplicate the problem. We need to feel or hear or see what's happening. That's almost the first step, is all the time is duplicating it. Can we replicate the problem?
Well, when is it worth dealing with? So I'm going to give you another intermittent issue in my life other than my co-host. We have a shop truck. It's a 2002 Dodge. And every so often, the windows just decide not to work. And none of them roll down. So, but it's one of those things where it's intermittent, it's gone in 5 minutes. So by the time we even, I'm pretty sure the master switch is bad on the driver's door because of the way it's acting, and I could certainly guess that. And I'd be 90% sure I would be right. I haven't even called to price a switch out, but it's probably a $100, $150 switch. I don't know. It's the master switch on the driver's door. So if it's a problem enough to just go ahead and replace it, I could guess with the switch. It'd be a good educated guess. I'd be 90% sure I'd be right.
So if it's a breakdown issue or a confidence issue, it's probably more worth doing it. If it's an annoyance, like the brakes squeak once in a while and the shop has looked at them and verified that there's good pad life, there's no safety issues, it's an annoyance, then you start to wonder what's the value versus annoyance ratio.
The factor, right?
Yeah. What is that? But then there's a lot of things that you can do as the owner of the vehicle where, you can take some notes. Instead of saying, well, it just does it once in a while, get your notepad, get your iPhone, send yourself an email when it happens, and establish a pattern. So what are the conditions? Maybe it was hot ambient temperature, but the car had just started. When we say cold, was it cold, meaning the first startup in the morning? Was it what we might call a hot soak? It happened after you drove for an hour and went in the grocery store for 30 minutes or something like that.
The other question that's key, and the one you want to take note of, and we always ask, how often does it happen? Well, every now and then. That's not the question that I ask. What's the frequency? Time over intensity. So does it happen once a day, once a week, once a month? For the technician, that's going to help us help guide you into not chasing an issue that we don't want to chase.
Well,
because we're just, you're running up a bill because auto shops consider their time and how many tests they have to run. So one of the things you mentioned was having the technician drive it home. Sometimes that's a great tool. We've got a technician that works for us that lives 50 miles from the shop. And when somebody says it only happens every 45 miles, hey, I've got a guy, and it doesn't cost anything extra other than the gas in your car. So, that's one thing that we do.
Yeah, that's just part of one of the many ways that we can help do this. It's tough for some shops to go drive in traffic. They say it does it at 70 miles an hour. Fortunately, I'm downtown. I'm near a freeway. I can get out and go 70 miles an hour. But some guys aren't near a freeway. You can't go blasting through a school zone at 70. So you've got to have somebody that can maybe drive it home. That's one thing that's helpful.
Well, and really when we're having this conversation, I'm thinking you as the consumer, you got a problem that you got to deal with, and it happens once every 3 days. Okay? The auto shop may have your car for 3 days, and that's one way to look at it, but it's something you have to go after because it is a safety concern. And the other thing you may ask them, if it doesn't feel like they're ready to dive into it, hey, would your guy be willing to drive it home? Because some shops don't ask and they don't think to, but that's a great tool.
Well, and we're problem solvers by nature, technicians. I know I am. I want to fix the problem. I have some pride in that. And we always put undue pressure on ourselves. We've got to fix this. We've got to get it done by the end of the day. We've got to do this. Sometimes we need to back off and slow our roll a little bit.
Easy, Nitro.
And take some
Move
time.
some of that pride over to showing up every Saturday, and we'll be in good shape.
I can't take a vacation 2 Saturdays and not get them stepped on. So, but another intermittent problem that we're going to start seeing, and which is a level of definitely frustration, is air conditioning. Oh. It's the season now, and air conditioning sometimes and many times is a 2-step process. We have multiple things. We have to have a fan that works. We have to have a system with integrity that is capable of working. And then you have to have the controllers that tell all this when to happen and when the AC should shut off. And oftentimes that's an intermittent problem or even a 2-step process. So AC, I'm sure, will be a hot topic. It's a little cooler this weekend, but get ready because it's coming.
Up first this segment, we're going to go with Maria in Phoenix on a 2012 Honda Civic. Go ahead, Maria. You're on Bumper to Bumper Radio.
Yes, I had a problem. I turned off my car and I left the lights on for like 10 minutes. And when I turn it on, it will not turn it on. And the steering wheel, it was not locked. So I tried to turn the switch and it didn't let me do it. And I tried to move also the reverse and park, and it didn't let me. And I noticed that it has like a little thing, and I by the side like a little, I don't know, and I push it there, and then the I could move the thing reverse to park, but the switch, it didn't want to turn it on.
Okay.
And the car was practically dead.
Okay. Well, Maria, I think you've got a couple problems all related to what sounds like the root cause is a dead battery, right? You left the lights on so the car won't start now and it just won't start, and difficulty turning the key. So the first thing is if you left the lights on for a short period of time, even in an hour, the battery was probably on its last leg anyway. That's usually not enough time to kill the battery all the way. But I bet if you're looking at the car right now, the position you're parked in, you probably have the wheels turned. and maybe it's up against a parking curb or on a curb, or it's tight. Maybe the power steering was on, you had the wheels turned, and you shut the key off and take the key out, and that puts a lot of load on the lock in the steering column, and that's probably why you're having difficulty turning the wheel. Is this a 2012 Civic?
Yes, and also it happened the second time that it happens, and then I let it rest for a little bit, and then it turned on like nothing happened. And then 3 weeks later, I took it for to do the flush the oil, the transmission oil, and everything. And when I tried to turn it on, it didn't turn it on again. So they gave me a jump, and I went straight to AutoZone, and they put a little thing like to check what's going on. And the battery was okay, and everything was fine.
Okay. Well, if that's a 2012, I would suggest that that's probably under warranty. If it's that new of a car, would probably be a safe bet.
Year old.
Yeah, unless it's got a whole lot of mileage. But what I was saying, with the steering wheel turns like that, you've got to get some pressure off that lock in the steering wheel. So if, for example, if you're parked against a curb or in your driveway and the wheels are turned sharp, you've got to turn them a little bit more in the same direction and then turn that key, and that will get the bind off the steering column lock and at least get the steering wheel freed up. And then the shifter issue is exactly what it's supposed to be doing. If you can't turn the key on, they don't want you to be able to get that car out of park and into any other neutral or gear without having your foot on the brake. So that's the shift interlock. So I think all these problems are going to be revolved around a battery issue.
602-277-5827. Thanks so much for the call, Maria. We are going to go with Todd in Litchfield Park. Looks like he's got a 2008 Mazda 3. Go ahead, Todd. You're on Bumper to Bumper Radio.
Yes, I have a couple questions about my air conditioning. It's been acting up for 6-8 months now, and the hot weather coming, I'm trying to get it fixed now. I noticed this, like, if I'm making a left turn at a decent speed, 25 miles an hour, the air conditioning gets colder and the fan blows harder. And that's one character. And then a lot of times when it's on, it doesn't blow very cold if I'm not moving. And then there's one other thing. When I start it up, I'll turn it on and I'll see my air conditioning green light come off and on. So I don't know what's going on. I don't know if that's a compressor issue or what.
Have you ever had to have any air conditioning repairs done in the past?
Yes, I did. I had to have a tube replaced last year, a dealership tube. And they had to evac the system and refill it.
And then was this a similar situation you had prior to that, and it was solved with that, or is this a problem that happened immediately after the repair, or is just starting to surface now?
It's been gradually getting worse.
Okay. Well, it sounds like some weird problems. First off, turning left and right. I mean, I'm picturing maybe a blend door or something flapping open and closed, which would be definitely a strange deal. But the thing on air conditioning, that where we always need to start, we need to make sure that this car has a full charge of refrigerant all the time. And the only way to do that is to go to a shop that has the right equipment where we can hook up to the car and recover and measure by weighing in ounces how much refrigerant was in the car, and then compare that to what it's supposed to have. So if it needs 16 and you've only got 12, you're 4 ounces short. Just checking my math. A little rusty.
You are a little rusty.
But so we need to start with the good integrity of the system and make sure it's full of charge. Then we can do some testing to make sure it's working right and identify leaks.
Well, when we were talking about intermittent issues and air conditioning intermittent issues and frustration with it, you were talking a little bit about it's a two-step process to get the air condition checked out. And we've had a show before we talked about, you're going to go in and get a service. They may go ahead, everything may look good. They may add just a touch of Freon or just verify it. There's a dye that's put in, and then it may work great for the next week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, but then it may start to act up again, or it's not blowing as cool as it was at that time.
Cool but not cold is the classic symptom of a low charge.
So at that point, go back to the shop that serviced it. It's not that they didn't know how to service it the first time. That's a regular, everyday thing. They're going to put a black light on the system if it is, in fact, low on charge, and they're going to look for a leak that's happening, and then fix the leak and evacuate it and recharge it again.
But Dave, so people are wondering why you're putting a black light on it. We put an ultraviolet dye in the system that gets carried through the system with the oil. In theory, if there's a leak, that pressure will force this dye out, and then we can find that with the ultraviolet light. So we've got to start with a full charge. A low charge is going to equal low pressure. These cars have low pressure cycling switches to protect the compressors. So that can make a compressor cycle. It can still blow ice cold air and cycle too fast, get it coming on and off, and that could be why the green light's coming on.
Well, one thing that's going to happen is, when you first flicked on your air conditioner for the first time this year, man, it feels like it works pretty good. A low charge system feels pretty darn good when it's only 80 degrees outside. But now we're going to hit the 90 mark. And as soon as we hit the 100-degree mark, the phones start ringing as far as I need my air conditioning checked out, I need it checked out. You can be a little bit proactive and get that done before it becomes 110 degrees. Well, up for this segment, we are going to go with John in New River, 1997 S10. Go ahead, John. You're on Bumper to Bumper Radio.
Yes, I've got a 440 code that's been plaguing me. I've done vacuum checks and determined that I don't have a hose leak. I've changed the vapor tank pressure switch, which was bad, and I've also changed the vent valve, which they say is bad. And I still have the problem. On my freeze frame, it indicates 8.8 inches of pressure for testing, but I heard that you got to have 10 inches water column for testing. I don't know how the testing goes. I don't know the way the system is designed. Can you help me out on this?
What's the description of a PO44? It's some kind of evap leak. So
it's an evaporation. It's a vapor evap a problem.
Well, the first thing we have to do, you've got to make sure that the system is sealed and has, similar to the air conditioner, it's got to have the ability to hold the vacuum if you're measuring that pressure. So the obvious things, gas tank, gas caps, vacuum hoses, and we're going to be testing that stuff with the smoke. We call it a smoke machine, but picture your old choo-choo train when you were a kid. You had to put the sauce in there and it made smoke. Well, we have the same thing. We put a light amount of pressure on the system, and we're going to look for any smoke leaking out. We've got to start with a sealed system, whether that's the lines, the vent valve maybe functions mechanically or electrically, but it's stuck mechanically. Could be some issues. I know we've replaced some of these parts.
His question was, how does the thing function? And I'm asking the same question. Is that there's a pump that pressures this thing? On a Chrysler, it's an LDP, leak detection pump, which is a vacuum-operated pump, I believe it is, with solenoids to create vacuum. But on a General Motors, right off the top of my head, I don't know what does that. So maybe I was thinking, Matt, you might have more information.
There you go again,
See,
Dave.
putting you on the spot. I love it.
Well, it could be charcoal canister. There's a number of different things it could be, but we need to start then isolating out the system. If the specification is calling for 10 inches of water, I think is the pressure, or whatever the specification is, if we can't achieve that, now we've got to start isolating. Let's block off the lines closer to the tank and see if we're getting the pressure there. If we are, then we start backing down the line and find out where we're losing the vacuum or the pressure, negative pressure, whatever you want to call it. So that proper tools, smoke test, really understanding what the code is. And you've got to read through those codes, not just the description, but understand the parameters necessary to have the car work right, and what has to happen for it to fail to truly be able to diagnose it.
We're going to go with Dee Dee in Mesa on a 2003 Chevrolet Malibu. Go ahead, Dee Dee. You're on Bumper to Bumper Radio.
Good morning. I bought the car used last October, and I've had a slew of issues recently. But when you mentioned the air conditioning, that's what prompted me to call in. My air conditioning dial has off through 5, but it doesn't actually blow any air until you hit 4. And the other issue is that if it's not recirculating the air, you can kind of start just knock it off and get a little bit of a headache. So I leave it on the recirculating, but every once in a while it just moves back to bringing the air in, and I haven't been able to figure out why it does that.
Is there an actual switch where you can change it is it just a button for the recirculate or fresh air?
There's 2 buttons underneath the fan dial, so you get the fresh air and then the recirculate on the right.
That's a little concerning. That you said if it's on recirculate, you
get
can
a
feel
headache.
like
It's
you're
backwards.
Yeah, I would think it would be the opposite of that. That's a little bit concerning because we don't want to. Does the car have any exhaust leaks or anything like that?
I actually had a check engine light come on Super Bowl Sunday, actually, and the code that I had pulled at the parts store said it was an EGR with insufficient flow.
Okay.
And pretty much what I've been told is that it's not really a big deal unless you have to go through emissions, which I don't have to do until next year. The other issue that has recently come up is I was driving to lunch one day, and I was at a stoplight. When I hit the green, it shifted really hard into second, and I took it to a shop, and they said there's another code hiding under the EGR one that says there's an internal failure in the transmission, and you need a new transmission. But that particular symptom hasn't happened since.
Boy, that's going to get Dave fired up.
Yes.
There's no code that says you need a new transmission.
No.
I think
Okay.
there's there's a couple things. I'm concerned that you might have some sort of exhaust leak. Your description's a little bit backwards of what I would think. We definitely don't want to make sure we're just sucking on a tailpipe while we're driving the car, just with the fumes coming in. So that's an issue. But then the air conditioning control issue, if it's just going back and forth, there's a series of motors and controllers that point the air where it's supposed to go.
Mm-hmm.
So that could be an issue. The fan problem it's not the fan. I can tell you that because the fan is only going to spin at the speed that it's told to do. So you probably have a resistor issue there with the fan. And then
the fan, it's easy. The transmission thing has got me. I'm like, really.
Yeah.
Probably the code you have, just based off your make and model, is a P1811 code. Pretty common code, but it's not a new. Go get another transmission. It just needs to be repaired. It's not a. If it is the 1811 code, a lot of times it's not a major repair, but don't go throwing out a perfectly good transmission.
And it sounds like you've got a couple problems that maybe it's time to find someone besides the parts store. Find a shop that you can go in and just maybe part with the car for a day, and you're going to have to spend $100 or $200 possibly, and just especially since you said you recently purchased the car, and just give it the bumper to bumper check over. So front to back, let's establish a baseline with it, find out what those codes are, and then see what their recommendation is to in a prioritized order to take care of. And I agree, some of those check engine lights, not a big deal until you need to get through emissions. If it's not going to make you break down, it's not going to cost more money by waiting, depending on what the budgets are, but you don't want to just ignore them for the sake because somebody at the parts store said you could ignore them because it's not a big deal. And a perfect example is there's another code hiding there. If the light's on and you have a new problem, you don't know it.
Right.
So that's the other thing.
That's the problem with a light that just stays on all the time.
Yeah.
Nothing's going to tell you something's wrong. Thanks so much for the call, Dee Dee. We are going to go with, looks like, Spencer in Gilbert on a 2006 Toyota Sequoia. Go ahead, Spencer. You're on Bumper to Bumper Radio.
Thank you. Appreciate your time. Okay, so I have a 2006 Sequoia. It has 89,000 miles. I have a full factory warranty up to 100,000 miles that expires at the end of this month. Had a few weird issues with the transmission, but nothing that is easy to replicate. And was wondering if there's specific symptoms that you would recommend that I bring it to the dealership before the warranty expires, or if you would suggest taking it to a third-party shop that specializes in Toyotas before I take it to the dealership for that last trip under warranty.
I think this is kind of like Groundhog Day for Dave, because this is a common problem on Toyotas with the weird transmission problem. But I hear two questions here. Dave will talk about the transmission problem, but I want to talk about the warranty. You probably have an extended warranty. Maybe you bought that warranty when you bought the car, or you bought it as a certified used car. There is not a factory warranty that necessarily goes to 100,000 miles, unless it's something where in some cases they have extended an extended program because of common failures and stuff. So I want to assure you that I'm most certain that your extended warranty work can be done at any repair shop. So that's one thing, and Dave can talk to you about the transmission.
Well, the next point, one of the things that we find at dealerships is they don't generally take transmissions apart and fix them. They don't really know anymore what's on the inside of the transmission. So they're not going to, you need to widget this or widget that. It also in there makes it hard to diagnose. So there's plenty of good independent transmission shops that can diagnose the issue. And you said Toyota specific, in our world, transmission is transmission is transmission. There's very few transmissions where it's real specific anymore. You see one transmission in multiple brands, so it may be a Toyota transmission or an Asian Warner transmission that's in it's in a Volvo, it's in a Chevrolet. They use them across the industry, so it doesn't have to be a Toyota specific independent transmission shop, but that can be diagnosed. And I get your concern is if this thing's going to have a major problem before it goes out of warranty, I want to take care of it. Well, one thing I do want to clarify on some of your comments, longer warranties. I'm seeing a lot of the General Motors product in 2008 General Motors. It's got a 5-year, 100,000-mile powertrain warranty, which includes the transmission. So different eras of cars had different warranties. You can remember when Chrysler offered a lifetime drivetrain warranty?
Yeah, that was real short-lived and lots of fine print.
Lots of fine print.
Well, speaking of this, I'll beat them up a little bit. We talked about the marketing department and the reality and the engineers. We were looking the other day at some maintenance schedules on some older, when I say older car, I'm talking 5 years old, not a new car, but still a newer car. But in any case, we thought, what the heck is this? They want the differential serviced every 15,000 miles, and it's got synthetic fluid. Why? And then you go back a year, and then we start looking and go, oh, isn't that amazing? Now that they've offered the 100,000 mile or the lifetime warranty, now suddenly this needs to be serviced every 15,000 miles. And guess what? If you don't have those receipts, adios, amigo.
Not doing
no
it.
warranty.
Not doing it.
So,
well, before you get going too far, we're going to take Tiffany in surprise on a 2005 Volkswagen Jetta. Go ahead, Tiffany. You're on Bumper to Bumper Radio.
Hello. It's actually a 2004 Jetta TDI. And I've been having intermittent problems with it. I've had it at a couple of dealers several times. And what happens is when I pull into the driveway or I go to turn it off, everything shuts off. My clock resets, the radio shuts off, and I try to turn it over. It won't turn over. If I leave it sitting for 10 or 15 minutes, it'll turn over again. At the same time, sometimes when I put on my turn signals, the radio will turn off or the car starts to die.
How often, because that's the first question I ask on an intermittent issue like this, what's the frequency? Does it happen every day or once a week or once a month?
It goes in spurts. It can happen every day for a few days, a week, and then it won't happen again for a couple of weeks. Then I'll start up again. And then I'll bring it in. They can't get it to hit on any codes at the dealer.
Okay.
And then it'll be fine.
Does it have a factory radio or an aftermarket radio?
It has an aftermarket radio.
That is a problem a lot of times on the Volkswagens. We see that a lot. I can't remember exactly what it is. At my shop, we work on a lot of Volkswagens and Audis. There's Charles would know. I wish he's here today. But there's something weird about aftermarket radios. I don't think that's the problem necessarily, but that's one place I would look.
Okay.
And then one thing that you might be able to do, you need to be careful that you don't shut the car off while you're driving, is wiggle the key a little bit. It sounds like an ignition switch problem. I originally was going to say, maybe there's something going on with the starter, but getting hot. That's common after a car is very hot and been running, and you go to restart again, it won't start. But that's not going to make you lose the clock and everything. There's one thing that's a common denominator here, and we're going to find a bad battery connection, a bad ground, a faulty ignition switch possibly. So what you're doing when you're driving, paying attention, please. You can wiggle the key a little bit, almost like you want to shut the car off, but just move it back just a little bit, maybe forward just a little bit, and see if that can make the car stall or affect anything. Wiggle the keys. Not a big deal on the Volkswagen because the key lock cylinder isn't as integrated as it is in some cars, but you don't want to have a big, heavy set of keys hanging off your keychain either. that
Okay.
will cause, can cause those lock cylinders to fail prematurely. But it's
Well, I think it goes to the topic is that you need to take some good notes. So, it happens every so often, but you need to figure out the pattern. If you get to a good shop, and if you need one, Matt's a great one because they do all that type of work at Virginia Auto Service. But go ahead and take those notes so you have information when you go in there and say, this is when it happens. One of the things we do with people that have a real intermittent issue, and we look at it, can't find anything, we say, all right, listen. You're not going to have to make an appointment next time you come in. I want you to, as soon as that car acts up, I want you to drive it straight here, and I want you not to turn it off.
pull
Don't
right up to the door.
change anything. Pull right up to the door, come in and say, hey, my car's doing it right now. That's something that we have to do sometimes to catch these intermittent issues in the act. So take good notes and see if you can work out a relationship where you can do that.
And this is not going to be a code issue.
No.
Fault codes are going to be, there's some cars I was reading in the magazine this morning, the new whatever has 26 control modules in it. All those modules have the ability to set codes, but they're likely not going to, there's not going to be a code that sets for this. And if you're losing a main power supply, guess what? All those codes are erasing more than likely when all those modules lose power. Because if your clock's losing power,
everything.
It's everything's going dead at that point. I'd bet, what do they say, dollars to donuts? It's an ignition switch.
I've never heard that one. So we're going to sneak in Ron from Peoria on a 2005 Silverado. Go ahead, Ron. You're on Bumper to Bumper.
Hi, this is Ron. Good to talk to you.
Go ahead.
Hey, I have a transmission. Well, I just want to know about my transmission. My office is right across the street from your office in Tri-City.
Excellent place to be.
Yeah. But a lot of my friends have been over there, and they're very happy with your service. But I've been neglecting my truck. I have 150,000 miles on it 05. And the oil looks good. It's full. It doesn't smell bad. And I live in Peoria, and it's like, I don't hot rod or nothing. And is it okay to just come in for a regular service, you think?
Absolutely. I don't know when the last time you serviced it was.
I never have.
Never have. Okay.
No, that's what I'm scared about.
Probably that late in the game, what I would recommend to you is just the traditional transmission service first go around. Just traditional, so not a flush, nothing exotic like that. But we're just going to drop.
I don't hot rod. I just drive like there's an egg on my gas pedal. I don't.
Right. And it sounds like you do a lot of highway driving, so the transmission is not going through all the gears all the time, and it's easier on it. But I won't scold you for waiting that long to service it. So, but I would say just do traditional.
But there's another. I'm going to interrupt you real quick, Dave, because I don't know if you were going to go there or not. But before you take that car in and have Dave service it, that's the important part. Is they'll go on a test drive and make sure there's not some symptom that maybe you're not seeing. Look at maybe a slip rate and make sure there's nothing going on in there that you don't know about, because if there's already a problem, a service isn't going to help it. But you want to make sure there isn't something happening there that you may aggravate by doing a service, right? Am I right, Dave?
Yes. No, if there is a problem, maybe we don't want to service it. But if there isn't a problem, we absolutely do, because there's going to be a problem if we don't.